Hello everyone and welcome to my socio-cultural mini-teach. My name is Elizabeth Wilson and today we're going to be learning about poverty. The effects of poverty cannot be understated. Before you begin discussing the history of poverty, it is essential to note the effects poverty has on people, particularly children. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, the average U.S. poverty rate in 2019, based on the absolute definition, which we'll get into what absolute poverty is 10.5%, which differs depending on race, with white citizens being 9.1%, black 18.8%, and Hispanic 15.7%. And age under 18, 14.4%, 18 to 65, 9.4%, and 65 and older being 8.9%. In particular, what this means is the child poverty rate is significantly higher, with newborns to age 5 being 15.5%, age 6 to 11, 14.9%, and age 12 through 17, 12.9%. And what that means is children are the most impoverished. Poverty is a complex and insidious determinant of health caused by systematic factors that can persist for generations in a family. Beginning before birth and continuing throughout an individual's life, poverty can and will significantly impact health and health outcomes. And that's from the American Academy of Family Physicians. The effects of poverty have been linked to gene alteration in children. In addition, deprivation has negatively impacted children's cognitive development, emotional development, and self-regulation and psychological response systems. Poverty has also been linked to lower adaptive functioning, diminished self-confidence and self-esteem, strained peer relations, mental illness, and even temper tantrums. However, for me personally, the most significant way to show the true impact of poverty is not just on children but on all people was a study entitled "Is Poverty the Mother of Crime? Evidence from Homicide Rates in China." And the most problematic line to read in that study was, the results suggest that it is poverty and low income levels rather than income inequality that positively related to homicide rates. That means this study in effect found a correlation between homicide rates and poor areas, or areas of a lower level income. A history of poverty. The ideal that is poverty was created not long after the ideal that is currency. Historically, we have always been impoverished people. There have been impoverished people all over the world. The history of poverty is written in war, famine, drought, and starvation. Unfathomable humans have lost their lives to poverty. While there is no denying that the world has made huge progress against absolute poverty over the last 200 years, until recent times the bulk of that progress has been made in wealthy countries only. The good news is that we are seeing a greater progress against poverty in the developing world in recent times. Indeed, a faster pace progress against extreme poverty than the rich world saw over 100 years or more of economic improvement. Yes, it is true, in the past 100 years, global awareness and endeavors to end poverty have emerged. Even the UN has a council dedicated to ending poverty. The UNDP's mandate is to end poverty and build democratic governments, rule of law, and inclusive institutions. We advocate for change and connect countries to knowledge, experience, and resources to help them build a better life for their citizens. And so what's interesting about this is, for the first time in recorded human history, we are seeing a global effort to end poverty. Currently, it is legal in the United States and in multiple other countries to discriminate against someone if they are poor. Despite overwhelming research done on the causes of poverty, most studies find that people believe poverty is caused by either the government or society. While some people take a more individualistic approach to poverty, an overwhelming majority of studies indicate that poverty is caused by many factors and not one person's mistakes. However, despite this, it is still legal to discriminate against someone if they are poor, even if they had no choice in the matter at all. It would be impossible for me to provide you guys with a historical case where discrimination against the poor was held up in court because it's currently legal. But historically, poverty and discrimination against people who are poor, it goes further than just simple discrimination. It can be a life or death situation. In our times alone, in California, private firefighters sent by insurers saved the vineyards and estates of the fortunate few during the recent spat of wildfires, even as neighboring homes were reduced to ashes. For $50,000, private healthcare consultants can steer cancer patients to potentially life-saving clinical trials. We all know someone who has been touched by poverty and misfortune in our lifetime alone. Imagine those who have been touched by this ideal for centuries. The number would be impossible to grasp. Society's treatment of people who are poor. It goes without saying that, given the effects poverty has, poor people are generally disliked by society. Generally, they are viewed as unhealthy, gross, or even dangerous. Particularly those without housing are viewed the worst. These images were honestly some of the lesser offensive ones that I could find when discussing people without housing. If you'd like to donate now to help end homelessness, you can follow the link. There are an estimated 553,742 people in the United States experiencing homelessness on any given night. According to the most recent national point-in-time estimate, January 2017, this represents a rate of approximately 17 people experiencing homelessness to every 10,000 people in the general population. That's a lot. I can't begin to imagine how many of them are children. The undeserving poor, or the culture of poverty, and the underclass are moral statuses defined by the sources of dependence, the behavior with which it is associated, and its transmission to children, and its crystallization into cultural patterns. Empirical evidence almost always challenges this assumption underlying the classifications of poor people. What that means, in effect, is that there are all these different ideals of what poverty is, of who people are if they are impoverished. The deserved poor, the undeserved poor, the culture of poverty in a whole, and the underclass. All of these ideals can be seen across multiple cultures. But despite these ideals being seen globally and accepted globally, there is little empirical evidence that supports it. In fact, most empirical evidence always challenges the assumption underlining the classification of poor people. Thoughts from the UN. Internationally, and in America, there are systems and laws set up to protect human rights with regards to race, gender, religion, or political stance. We know this. However, according to the UN, there is no effective equality in practice, right? We can't point to one specific country and say this country shows 100% equality to all of its citizens. In our opinion, poverty is inseparably linked to human rights, acting as both a cause and effect of all human rights violations, and it must be tackled if de facto equality is then to be achieved. So what it's saying is, we have all of these laws and these systems in place to protect for equality in terms of race and gender and religion, but no policies in place to ensure protection for the poor. And oftentimes what we see is the people that are being discriminated against fall into the lines of poverty. So before we can begin addressing any other human rights, we have to start with poverty. Case study. My favorite case study that I have found in my research was published by the International Journal of Academic Research and Business, and Social Sciences. It's a bit of a challenging read, which could be due to the translation. Again, this article was published by the International Journal of Academic Research and Business and Social Sciences. They performed a systematic literature review of thousands of case studies on poverty. Indeed, they came up with some beautiful insights into all different forms of thought on poverty, what causes it, and ways to eliminate it. This is the only study that reviewed the concept of poverty over the period of 2000 to 2020, and the current review has identified several concepts, measurements, causes, and suggests potential suggestions to reduce or eliminate poverty. Moreover, it gives a complete assessment of existing literature as it depends on the results of the numerous research carried out earlier. As it depends on the numerous research carried out earlier, and related web pages. The distinguishing of different variables in this article was carried out based on the outcomes of various studies performed in different cultures and contexts around the world. And the suitability of these facts can be empirically studied in future studies and can be used in their poverty alleviation programs. Again, this was published by the International Journal of Academic Research and Business and Social Science, and they are encouraging different countries and states to use this information in their poverty alleviation programs, as it has been the result of countless and countless of hours of research and study across all different cultures. How to help your students. I would highly recommend watching both the ACDS's video for elementary students and for secondary students to any teacher considering working in an impoverished area. They're a bit long, but worth it, and here are links to both through the ASU library. And I'll just give you guys a little preview of what these movies are. They're both 2 movies, they're both about an hour long, and if you are wondering how you can help your students, if your student's struggling with poverty, definitely worth a watch. Here you
go. For children living in poverty, the odds are against them. But ASCD's new video, featuring author Eric Jensen, will show you how to beat those odds with smart, purposeful engagement strategies designed to help economically disadvantaged students graduate college and career ready.
When kids are not engaged, they drift off into what you and I would call counterproductive states, metabolic states. For example, apathy or boredom. Engagement keeps the metabolic process going.
This is one group. This is one group.
There
you go.
Yes. It's fun to be engaged in your learning.
The students never know what's coming, so it's kind of, what are we going to do today? Can you help me?
Yes.
Say, I'm going to be the teacher that the kids remember. You can be that teacher. Why? Brains can change, and that means not just your kids, but it means you can change too.
ASCD's Engaging Students with Poverty in Mind. Elementary School. Available now in the ASCD store. Get your copy today.
And as I said, you can go through the ASCD store to watch it, or if you just like to follow either one of these links, you can watch the first video is about elementary schools, and the second one is about secondary students, and it has some really, truly, I'm so sorry.
For children living in
it has some really, truly just great helpful techniques for how to help kids struggling with poverty. And here is the framework suggested by the ADSA for turning high poverty schools into high performance schools across any school district, in any classroom, and any state. Additionally, they recommend that you ask high leverage questions, use all data available to you, and build relationships with everyone in the building while using this framework. And you can see this framework here is super all-encompassing. They're saying that the biggest 3 things that any high poverty school can do to turn themselves into a high performance school are these 3 actions, focusing on these 5 spheres of influence, and fostering these 6 school culture aspects. And if you follow this framework, and all the while asking high leverage questions, using all the data available to you, and building relationships with everyone in your school district, you can change a high poverty school into a high performance school. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my presentation on poverty, and I hope you enjoyed. Have a good night.